L'chaim, l'chaim. Welcome back. Thank you for joining. We thank you for subscribing. We're here with a special presentation on this day. We'd like to honor the 13th day of Elul, which is quite a special time. We learned here in the Sikha just weeks ago, and we were talking about the Frierdiker Rebbe at his wedding. He has all these special guests that are there, and we're talking about the fact that marriage, there's these different phases of marriage. There's people who are trying to get married, then there are people who are married, and then there are people that are at the stage and the age of when they're marrying off their children. And we talked about how this correlates to our relationship with God's relationship with the Jewish people. And we spoke about these things in very great depth. And this particular Maimarim and Sichas were taken from the 13th of Elul, which is the wedding date of the Frierdiker Rebbe, which is the date that we're holding by right now. So we have to know, every corner in the Theodore Jason studio I have cleaned and prepared. But when this moment came about, we have to know that sometime God wants to use you in the corner that you haven't quite prepared, or he wants us to be open, and he wants us to be revealed. And as we've talked about before, having these structured places in our lives, and not necessarily a facade, but a place where we hide by, in a comfort zone, and where we feel. And in this month of Elul, when the king is in the field, so we want to be toiling. We want to be learning, if that's what you do, but we want to know that the king is in the field and he's right beside us and learning with us and joining with us and toiling. So right now, as we say L'chaim, may we stop letting our minds dictate our joy, and let's connect to the Gan Eden, the Garden of Eden, that's within inside of our own souls, where we are already complete. And may that unconditional joy break all of our personal limitations. All those that are able, say L'chaim, and a special continued bracha for the children in school this week, and for all the teachers and all the wonderful work that you're doing. The kid is still wearing the bright colors and the light colors and the dashiki. Let's Farbrengen some facts, okay? So, the Frierdiker Rebbe, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak Sneerson, he's the sixth Lubavitcher Rebbe, and he got married on this 13th day of Elul, according to Chabadpedia. And he married Rebbetzin Nechama Dina. So the date in that year was the year of 1897, and it was August 27th in the town of Lubavitch. So the Shidduch, which is like the match, it's saying that his father, the Rebbe Rashab, who's the fifth Lubavitcher Rebbe, who writes Haikaltsu, and he, the Frierdiker Rebbe, is the father-in-law of our Rebbe Menachem Mendel Schneerson. And he explicitly chose this Shidduch because he wanted his son to marry within the family. Rebbetzin Nechama Dina was a great-granddaughter of the Samak Tzedek, who was the third Chabad Rebbe, also Menachem Mendel. And it says that the wedding took place on a Friday, And it was following the custom of the time. The chuppah was held during the day, and the wedding feast doubled as the Friday night Shabbat meal, which we see. It says here that the legacy, it was during the week of their Sheva Brachot, which is the 7 days of post-wedding celebrations, that the Rebbe Rashab formally founded the legendary Chabad Yeshiva Tomkei Tamimim. Okay, so there were discourses. Here, let's go ahead and look at 3 parts, of the core mimer and some of the background for us in this moment before we go definitively just one step further into the text. And it says that the definitive discourse series delivered for this wedding it's called Hemshech Samak to Samak, 57 this year of 1897, also known as the Great Samak to Samak, which is this blessing that's part of the Sheva Brachos, what we'll get to, the 7 blessings. And the Rebbe Rashab delivered a text at every single meal of the Sheva Brachot week, and they're studied today as a master class. And what we're trying to bring out right now is on the cosmic spiritual reality of a wedding. The deep spiritual background. So in Chassidus and the Chassidut, a wedding is not just this human contract, okay? It is a cosmic union. And the Rebbe Rashab, the 5th Lubavitcher Rebbe, 7th, if we're counting from the Bel Shem Tov, explains that the joy of a wedding, this Simchat Nesu'in, draws down a light so intense that it transcends all structured, orderly, spiritual worlds. It taps directly into the divine essence, this Orim Ein Sof. So, this beginning of the text in Samak to Samak, they're talking about the paradox of joy, and this word Samach, it means to rejoice, but it also shares a root with bringing distant things close. Like, the concept is why that we are so joyous at the chuppah, at a wedding, because these, bless the Lord, oh my soul, may the words of my mouth and meditation of my heart be acceptable before you, God, my strength and my redeemer. These souls, they're, one in life and possibly even in heavenlies. I'm not sure all these things, but they're kind of like back to back as they're one, okay? So then they come down into this life through different parents and through different derricks and paths of life, and they go into the world, and then when they find each other and they come face to face, so how great and such a beautiful thing that this is. Now, the cosmic bride and groom, and the groom represents Kadosh Baruch Hu, the Holy One, blessed be He. And the bride represents Knesset Yisrael, which is the soul of the Jewish people, if you will. And the Rebbe Rashab explains that through the joy generated at a Hasidic wedding, a person shatters their internal boundaries and structural blockages, the Yetzer Hara, drawing ultimate holiness into the physical reality. So the Lubavitcher Rebbe taught that every single year on the 13th of Elul, this exact same cosmic joy and spiritual light break into the world again, only stronger. We do not just look back at a wedding from 1897, but even right now, we tap into the pipeline of joy right now on this broadcast right now. So, the way this broke down in the year 1897, the atmosphere in Lubavitch is very electric, okay? It's very exciting, and day by day, the history notes that on this Thursday, which was the 12th of Elul, the day before, guests from across Europe arrived in the small town of Lubavitch, and the atmosphere is tense, but it's anticipatory. And then on Friday, the 13th of Elul, the wedding day, which in America for us is starting now. Some people on the East Coast are a little bit further into it. In the morning, the Rebbe Rashab personally places the shtreimel, which is the festive fur hat, on his son's head, instructing him to say the blessing of the Shechianu. Vehikimano, vehikimano, lesman hazeh. The blessing of allowing, God allowing you to make it to this occasion. So the chuppah, the actual wedding, takes place in the open during the day. And as they walk to the canopy, the Rebbe Rashab whispers into his son's ear, "V'chazakta v'hayisa la'ish." You shall be strong and become a man. So the wedding feast emerges straight into the Friday night Shabbat meal in the Great Hall, the Zal. And the Rebbe Rashab walks around the room alongside three trusted Hasidim, pouring the mashka, the liquor, for every person and sharing personal lachaims in a place of bracha. And as we're saying in this cosmic spiritual sense right now, that we should be able to overcome our Yetzaras and, see revealed godliness in our lives, and even so much more so, walk upright into the era of Mashiach. Now, Sunday, the 15th of Elul, after the Shabbat, after the Sheva Brakot feast, the Rebbe Rashab, his father, changes Chabad history forever. And he publicly announces the founding of the yeshiva at Tomkei Tamimim, and it's a landmark institution combining traditional Talmudic study with deep esoteric Hasidut. And so Tuesday, the 17th of Elul, the Rebbe Rashab handpicks the first group of 18 foundational students to start learning, and the freshly married Frierdiker Rebbe is instantly appointed as the executive director of the new flagship yeshiva. So other major Chabad milestones in the month of Elul. On the 1st of Elul, the Alter Rebbe, Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi, he famously began his historic custom of blowing the shofar every single day of the month to awaken souls for repentance, as we're all doing right now. On the 11th of Elul is the wedding anniversary of the Rebbe Rashab himself to Rebbetzin Sternish Sarah in the year 1875. The 13th of Elul is the wedding of the Frierdiker Rebbe and Rebbetzin Nekamadina in 1897. And the 15th, 2 days later, the formal declaration establishing the yeshiva at Tomkei Tamimim. And then so we're quickly approaching Chai Elul, and this is the crown jewel date of the month. It is the joint birthday of the two great lights of Jewish mysticism, the Baal Shem Tov, who is the founder of the Chassidut, and the Alter Rebbe, who is the founder of Chabad Hasidus. Remember that word. Asking God that we stop letting our minds dictate our joy, and we connect into the Gan Eden, into the Garden of Eden, inside our own souls, where we're already complete. This is the concept that we're talking about and bringing down, the fact that we be complete, and this unconditional joy that we have, and how it breaks all of our personal limitations. So, samak to samak, okay? Basic, more formal education before we continue into just a drop of the text of the mimer. It's a central text from the Sheva Brakot, which is the 7 blessings recited at Jewish weddings and during the week of celebration following the wedding. And it's a powerful wish to the newlywed couple to experience the same pure, intense joy that humanity experienced at the very beginning of the creation in the Garden of Eden. text says something similar to Samak to Samak Re'im Ha'ahuvim Kasamechacha Yersercha Bagan Eden Mechadem Barokata Hashem Sameach Chaten Vakala. In English, these concepts being similar to gladden the beloved companions, just as you gladdened your creations in the Garden of Eden of old. And blessed are you, Lord our God, who gladdens the groom and the bride, which you'll see in various places. So then the mimer, the Hasidic discourse on Samak to Samak, and this generally points to 56, 57, the particular year, which is known as the Great Samak to Samak, that the Rebbe Rashab delivered at the wedding of his son. And later, in the year 1981, the Lubavitcher Rebbe delivered discourses expounding upon its opening, and the original Hebrew text of the opening chapter of the Mimer focuses on explaining how the divine attributes of Chachma and Bina achieve an infinite level of joy through blessing. And the opening begins with this blessing and immediately addresses this core question that if Bina, lightly translated as understanding, okay, is inherently the mother of joy, and Chachma, which is wisdom, is the source of pleasure, which the Hebrew word we call is oneg. Why is it necessary to pray for joy for these intellectual faculties? The discourse explains that the innate intellectual joy is limited and dependent on comprehension. The prayer asks to draw down an infinite divine joy, which is the Or Ein Sof, that transcends these limitations, creating a deeper unified state that allows for a new higher level of revelation. Let's take a few moments and let us try to break down some of the deep mystical concepts that are here, and let's try to make them practical and relatable, and we want them to be life-changing psychological lessons. And the core theme of this mimer and how we're trying to apply it to our lives and make it directly relatable and change our lives and our minds and in our souls and in our actions and in our understanding and in our wisdom is, how do we access a joy that never breaks even when life gets messy? So let's take a look at 4 steps. Let's keep it in English. And let's see if we can share this over this L'chaim, this 13th of Elul. So there's something called the kasha, which is the opening question, okay? And the concept here is that the mimer starts with the wedding blessing that we're talking about, gladden the beloved companions, just as you are gladdened your creations in the Garden of Eden of old. Okay, that's Gan Eden. So the Kabbalistic deeper inner meaning is that in the Chassidus, the beloved companions is Reim Ha'ohuvim. It refers to 2 divine intellects. There's the Chachma, which is our wisdom. It's like a flash of insight. And Binah, which is understanding, like a deeper comprehension. There's different ways that these concepts are explained and brought down. And the question that we're talking about right here is that, why do we need God to bring joy to intellect? Wisdom and understanding are already inherently pleasurable. You know, like when we understand a godly, idea or toil and spiritual concepts, there's a joy that we derive from this. And when we finally understand a difficult concept, it feels amazing. So why do we pray for something that happens naturally? Because there's conditional and then there's unconditional joy. The mimer explains that there's 2 different distinct levels of joy, as we're learning with Rabbi Yossi, interestingly enough, this Sunday. Chassidus, please join us every Monday for Chassidus with Rabbi Yossi Friedman here, 9 a.m. Arizona time. So this first level, this level 1, is like an intellectual joy, and it's limited. This is the joy of Bina, and it is beautiful, but it has a like this big tumultuous flaw on top of it that it's conditional, and it relies on your understanding. And if you don't understand, then the joy stops. If life doesn't make sense, the joy vanishes, which many of us are very familiar with, right? And there's level 2, which is essential joy, which is infinite. And this is the joy that we really pray for, okay? And we ask God to draw down light from his Or Ein Sof, which is the infinite light that transcends the intellect even higher. This is the joy of the neshama, of the soul, simply because it is connected to the divine. It doesn't need a reason. And then, closing here in just a moment or two, we speak about the symbolism of Adam and Eve in the garden. Why does the blessing mention Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden of old, this Makadem? And the takeaway here is that, let's think about Adam and Eve, okay? In the first hours of their creation, they had no past, no baggage, no trauma, more realistically, no mortgage, no worries about the future, okay? They didn't have to achieve anything to feel worthy. And their joy was pure existence and connection to God. And so we're praying that the newlyweds and all of us can tap into this unconditional state of being where joy is our default setting, not something we have to earn, if you will. What do we take away from all this, okay? Stop waiting for understanding to be happy, okay? If you wait for your life, your marriage, your finances, or the world to make perfect sense before you choose to be happy, you will never be happy. That is the trap of the limited intellect and the Bina. But if we serve God with unconditional joy, with true simcha, joy, it's a tool to break through barriers. And when you choose to be joyful simply because your soul is connected to the infinite, you unleash a divine energy that actually fixes the things that are in your life that aren't making sense. Did I mention this is easier said than done? Should we talk about Chakma and Bina just a bit some more? Let's go on just a few more minutes. And this Chakma, which is like a seed, it's a flash of light in this initial concept, and it's intuitive and lightning fast and boundless. And it represents the husband element in Kabbalah. Bina is the womb, the processing. Okay. And it takes that flash and builds it out. It categorizes, analyzes, and brings the concept down to earth. And this represents the wife element, the feminine aspect. And this Reim Ha'uhuvim, these beloved companions that we were speaking about in the mimer, notes that they are called companions because they cannot function without one another. Chachma without Bina, a husband without a wife is brilliant, but it never gets built. And Bina without Chachma, the wife without the husband, it's a complex machine, but there's no fuel. There's no inspiration. God forbid that we all have differing traits and that it's a free world where we express ourselves in different ways, but the concepts that we can try to apply into our lives to have this intellectual connection. The mimer explains that if we are left to our own devices, intellect even divides, you know. The more we think, analyze, and ultimately rationalize, the more that there's argument and separations and boundaries that are created. And true infinite joy, this samach tasemach, only happens when a higher transcendent light, the keser, which is will and pleasure, it shines down on them. So the higher light forces this chachma and this bina to harmonize and bring a joy that bypasses an intellectual friction. There's like a concept, a husband doesn't need a wife, he wants to do his own thing. He doesn't need, a woman, mama, she's living her life. She doesn't need another opinion. She doesn't need a man. She doesn't need a boyfriend. But a husband needs a wife. And a wife needs a husband. So the marriage blueprint, okay? So how do we apply this and make it deeply personal and for you right now in this day, even years later, how do we take these concepts of chachma, of a husband, of bina, of this wife, of this masculine and femininity, and this Garden of Eden, and how do we bring it down into our own lives, talking about a relationship? We go from let's say lacham. Transaction to essence. Transaction to essence. May God help us all. Our feet ought to be hurting us right now from taking so many steps with the King. Our psyches, our everything about us ought to be stretching to the highest and holiest level. We reiterate the concept of the fact as we're in this month and we're preparing ourselves for judgment in the month of Elul and to receive this good and holy pure judgment that's in front of us. We're talking about the fact that two concepts. A father likes a clean heart. Okay, so we're working on ourselves and on our character traits, etc. Mamish, even our good ones. Somebody said, I don't understand. How can I work on my good character traits? Even the side of us that is good and desires to do godliness, we have to work on that so that it goes in and manifests and directs itself, and it may only be good, but it may get corroded or soiled or tarnished, and we have to go inside and work on it. And a king loves a clean garment. We put on a garment. We're thankful. On a small note of the Farbrengen, I have a different shirt that I'd like to wear. But as I look now, we're trying to, thank you God, in the Theodore Jason studio, we're trying to make some upgrades. I notice on the video, you can see a little bit more than you can. You see them wrinkles coming through. The executive producer told me, he said, Yisrael, please make sure that your dashiki is ironed, because, you can see just everything. And we're thankful to God, and this is how we go inside. Now, let's go back to this concept of talking about transaction to essence, because as being there's a problem that happens, okay? Many of us fall into the trap of this Bina marriage. This Bina marriage, it's conditional, and it's logical and transactional, okay? If you do X for me, I will do Y for you. If you behave logically, I will be happy. And the solution is that the mimer is calling this Gan Eden marriage, this Garden of Eden marriage before the tree of knowledge. Adam and Eve, they didn't even look at each other through the lens of utility and calculation. They saw each other as an extension of their own essence. And today, we give one another a bracha so that we should be able to see the essence of ourselves and our spouses. And our spouses to be, as we're being married, in the stage and age to marry our children off, that we are seeing that in this other person. And this true Hasidic marriage means loving our spouse unconditionally at this level of the etzim, which is in the essence, simply because our souls, that your souls, are bound together by God. Lastly, we're talking about the power of Betel, which is this selflessness, which is the ultimate fuel for the fire that helps us create natural friction, that is creating a friction by becoming non-existence per se, if we can explain it as that. And for this chachma and this bina, to marry and create joy, we have to practice this Betel. So for the husband and the wife to marry and create this joy, we have to practice this nullification of our ego. And if Chachma insists it is the only thing that matters, like we do as men sometimes, and as the husband, or if the wife, Bina, refuses to accept the flash of Chachma, the system breaks. So in marriage, we have to look past our own absolute rightness, which is not easy to do, granted. I'm talking to myself, not to you. I'm talking to me, to Yisrael Boykin. An intellectual stubbornness destroys the peace, The Lubavitcher Rebbe teaches us this concept that we don't always have to be right. You have to be kind. And it sounds cute as he's saying it. And it's like, until I have to be kind instead of being right because I'm right and I don't want to be kind. I want to be kind about the fact that I'm right. This intellectual stubbornness destroys peace. Both partners have the humility realize that Shalom Bayis loosely translated as peace in the home, and the divine presence, or Ein Sof, are bigger than our individual opinions. The infinite light of the Ein Sof enters into the room as We have this, as we've been explaining and talking about, the symptom, this contraction. And when we pull ourselves back and our desire to always be right and leave room for others, and a vacuum is created where an existence, the godliness can come down in between us. Intellect is a tool to process life, but it's a terrible place for us to anchor our happiness. True joy comes from the soul, not from circumstances making sense. And our relationships, we don't run transactional marriages. L'chaim. We reach back to the Garden of Eden. And in that state, we love our spouses unconditionally. Just because that God has put our two halves back together. May we all be able to see and feel and hear and touch, taste, see, and know this essence. As we connect to the Frierdiker Rebbe and Rebbes and the Kamadina and the Rebbe Rashab on these wonderful times. Let's talk briefly before we close about a story of the Samak Tzedek in 1928 at his wedding with Chaya Mushka. Very interesting that our Rabbi has the same name and his wife the same name. Talk about this unconditional joy. The Samak setting and his wife, they're married behind the Iron Curtain in different times. Their wedding took place in Warsaw, Poland. And it was massive, and it was joyous. And the greatest Hasidic masters of all Europe were there attending. And hundreds of miles away, though, a tragedy was unfolding in the Rebbe's parents, Levi Yitzchak and Rebbetzin Chana. They were trapped inside Soviet Russia, and because of Rabbi Levi Yitzchak's fierce defiance of the communist regime, keep Judaism alive, and some serious nefesh that the people were having, the Soviet authorities, they strictly denied them permission to leave the country. They were utterly prevented by the Iron Curtain from physically standing under the chuppah of their eldest son. Logically, their home should have been a place of deep sorrow that night. Intellectually, inside of their mind, their bina, made no sense to be happy. They were isolated and they were monitored by the KGB and missing the most important milestone of their lives. But Rebbetzin Chana, she writes in her memoirs that what actually happened that night in their home in Yekaterinskliav, they decided that the physical distance could not touch the essence, the etzem, of their soul connection to their son. And they set the tables in their apartment, put out whatever food and the l'chaim they had, and they invited local Jews to celebrate. Throughout the night, Rabbi Levi Yitzchak danced with ferocity and a joy that shocked everyone who saw him. He was singing and pouring l'chaim, totally elevated to a state where the Soviet oppression did not exist. His joy was not based on the physical reality. It was drawn from a transcendent, boundless place, the exact same samach to samach. This energy of the Garden of Eden. And at the exact moment in Poland, in Warsaw, the bride's father, the Frierdiker Rebbe, stood up at the wedding mill. He pulled down a deep Hasidic discourse, this mimer, and these concepts that we're even talking about right now, straight words from God, explicitly told the crowds that the souls of the groom's parents were spiritually present right there in the room, breaking through the physical boundaries of the Soviet Union and their borders. L'chaim. Look at the Rebbe's parents, okay? They had used their logic, their binah. They would have spent that night crying. They chose to tap into the soul's unconditional joy. They understood that a wall or a distance cannot separate two entities that are truly one. This is our lessons for our own lives and our own marriages. Mamish. When things look messy, or when physical circumstances tell you that you have a reason to be sad or distant, may we have none. Throw the Farbrengen anyway. Choose to dance anyway. When we tap into this unconditional Garden of Eden joy, we break away the heavy iron walls of our own lives, which could be even more stronger in theory than this iron curtain in the Soviet Union that here in America we perhaps know nothing about. Even many souls are this continued thought of the continued and recurring exodus that is upon our lives, even just the most place where we're hold and held is in our souls and in our minds and our bodies and of the things that affect us personally. And our limitations and our mitzrayim we've already been delivered to and received the Torah on Shavuot. Gone through a whole summer, now in the month of Elul, when the King is in the field, walking with us, preparing for us to give us a sweet judgment into the new year. May we understand God's essence. May we be able to see God in the middle of our mess. And may we give God something that he can bless by elevating ourselves and pushing on in blessed continuance. Thank you for joining. We thank you for subscribing.